Imagine lying in your rack at 0300 hours. The barracks lights dimmed to red for night ops readiness. The only sound, the low hum of the AC unit and the occasional creak of an old building settling. You're at Fort Liberty, once called Fort Bragg, one of the largest military installations in the world, home to airborne special forces and psychological operations units. Tens of thousands of soldiers cycle through these barracks every year. Most nights, it's just another long-duty rotation. But some nights, something else moves through the corridors. Tonight's stories aren't from the Cold War archives or dusty declassified files. They're from right now. 2020 soldiers, NCOs, and junior enlisted who've experienced things in these very barracks that defy explanation. Things that echo a plan so dark it was buried for decades. Operation Northwoods. In March 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff presented a top-secret memorandum to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, titled Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba. It outlined false flag operations to manufacture public support for invading Cuba. Proposals included staging hijackings of civilian airliners, bombing U.S. cities like Miami, and sinking boats of Cuban refugees, then planting evidence to blame Fidel Castro. Even sinking a U.S. ship at Guantanamo Bay and conducting mock funerals for fabricated casualties to stir national outrage. President Kennedy rejected it outright. The plan never executed, officially. But what if ideas that extreme don't just vanish? So what if the psychological weight of contemplating deception against your own people lingers, like a psychic residue in places where soldiers train to manipulate perception, to wage war on minds? Fort Liberty's PSYOP units still operate here. Barracks in the Smoke Bomb Hill area, near the old airborne compounds, have reports dating back decades, but modern accounts have surged. Soldiers describe apparitions in uniform that aren't on any roster, voices whispering classified phrases over dead comms lines, shadows that mimic false flag staging drills. These aren't ghost stories for campfire entertainment. They're testimonies from men and women who've sworn oaths, deployed to real conflicts, and now question what watches them in the dark. Tonight, we hear from those who've lived it. Chapter 1. The Static on the Line. My name is Sergeant First Class Ramirez, 4th Psychological Operations Group. I have been stationed at Fort Liberty since the summer of 2019. The barracks I was assigned to sit off Ardennes Street. 2-story cinder-block buildings thrown up in the 80s. The kind the post-engineers keep promising to gut and modernize, but never quite get around to. Paint peels in long strips along the exterior corridors, and the HVAC units rattle like they're trying to cough up their last breath. Most nights it is just background noise. That particular stretch of late 2025, though, the noise became something else entirely. We were in the final prep phase for a battalion-level field training exercise focused on influence operations. My section had drawn the night shift for comms checks, testing high-frequency radios, running simulated deception broadcasts, the usual workload that keeps PSYOP sharp. I was in my room on the 2nd floor, rack nearest the window, headset on, cycling through frequencies while Specialist Hayes sat across from me logging signal strength. The digital clock on my wall unit read 0217. Outside, the pine line beyond the parking lot swallowed any moonlight that might have slipped through the overcast. Hayes suddenly yanked his own headset off. "Sarge, you hear that?" I paused the playback loop. The room fell quiet, except for the low drone of the air handler and someone's muffled snoring 2 doors down the corridor. Then it arrived, static, but not the flat hiss you get from an open channel. This was textured, layered, almost analog in quality. Voices punched through in fragments, military clipped, deliberate, are the way officers speak when they know the recording will be reviewed later. Alpha Echo. This is Control. Confirm target package. False insertion green. Casualties will be staged for maximum effect. Hayes stared at me. His face had gone the colour of old PT tape left too long in a duffel. "That's not our net, Sarge. We're locked on 6.820. That's not even in our band plan tonight." I double-checked the frequency readout on the display. Dead. No transmission indicator lit, no squelch break logged on the monitoring software. But the voices continued, faint, looping like a degraded magnetic tape stuck on repeat. "Execute Pretext 1, hijack civilian asset. Plant evidence pointing to external actor. Public outrage phase critical for Phase 2 approval." The words landed like ice water down the back of my neck. I knew them. Not word for word, perhaps, but the cadence, the precise terminology. It was lifted straight from the Northwoods file. I had read the Declassified Joint Chiefs of Staff memorandum during a command history brief 2 years earlier. Chess Swiop School loves to trot out the 1962 proposal as the textbook example of how far false flag thinking can stretch before civilian leadership slams the door shut. Stage terrorist acts on U.S. soil, sink refugee boats off the Florida coast, conduct mock funerals for fabricated dead, plant charges on American vessels in Guantanamo Bay, blame Fidel Castro at every turn, manufacture ironclad consent for invasion. President Kennedy reviewed it once and killed it on sight. The plan died on paper, or so the official record claims, except now it was bleeding through my radio like a ghost signal refusing to fade. I keyed the mic out of reflex. "This is Sierra 4 Actual. Identify yourself and clear the frequency immediately." Nothing returned but more static. Then the same fragmented loop, softer this time, almost conversational, as though the speakers had stepped closer to the microphone. Hayes stood up fast enough to knock his chair back. "Unplug it, right now." I reached behind the desk and yanked the power cord free. The set went dark instantly. Silence flooded back in, thick and sudden. We sat there, breathing hard for a full minute before either of us trusted ourselves to speak again. "Old wiring," I said finally, forcing calm into my voice. "Induction from the cell tower on post. Happens all the time in these buildings." He nodded, but neither of us believed the explanation for a second. The next night I was alone. Hayes had drawn charge of quarters duty. I was scrolling through an after-action review draft on my phone, trying to shake off the unease, when the overhead lights flickered. Not a brownout from the aging grid, but deliberate pulses, like someone walking past a motion sensor in the hallway outside my door. I glanced at the security camera feed pulled up on my laptop. Corridor empty. No boots, no shadows, no movement at all. Then the latrine door at the far end of the hall slammed, not closed, slammed with enough force to rattle the metal frame and send a vibration through the floor. I grabbed my flashlight, cleared the corridor NCO style, sweeping corners and checking sightlines the way we are trained. Nothing. Tile floor dry, sinks dripping in slow rhythm, mirrors still fogged from earlier evening showers. I turned back toward my room. In the mirror directly in front of me, a figure stood behind my own reflection. Class A uniform, early 60s cut, no name tape visible, no branch insignia. The face was blurred, pixelated almost, like bad analog video reception struggling to resolve. It did not move. It simply watched. I spun around. Empty hallway. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the rack, pulse hammering in my ears. The radio, unplugged since the previous night, crackled once, softly, as though testing whether anyone remained listening. Operation Northwoods approved at echelons. Kennedy rejects. The echo persists. I stared at the dead set. No battery compartment. No backup power source. I had checked it myself the day we moved in. I carried the entire rig down to the dayroom trash and left it there without a word. I reported a catastrophic equipment failure to the section chief the next morning. He raised an eyebrow, signed the maintenance 2404, and told supply to issue a replacement when one became available. They never did get around to it. I requested a room change that same week. The wait list stretched 6 months long. I stayed put. Months later, I still catch fragments. Not every night, but often enough that I've stopped calling it coincidence. A short burst of static when I walk past the old comms closet on the ground floor. A single phrase whispered through the air vent at 0300. Pretext remains viable. Once, during a brief power flicker across the entire block, my phone, locked screen dark, lit up with a single line of text from no identifiable sender. The plan never executed. The intent did. I do not talk about it much anymore. Chain of command already wrote the initial incident off as stress and faulty equipment. Maybe they are right. Or maybe ideas that toxic do not vanish when a president says no. Maybe they sink into the concrete foundations, into the ancient wiring, into the very barracks themselves, waiting for someone else to pick up the microphone. I still sleep in that room. Most nights I leave the window cracked, hoping the pine wind will carry the voices somewhere else. It never does. They simply grow quieter, more patient, like they are waiting for the right crisis, the right pair of hands, the right moment to finish what was started in a smoke-filled conference room in 1962. Chapter 2. The Mock Funeral Procession. My name is Private First Class Elena Torres, 82nd Airborne Division. I arrived at Fort Liberty in early 2023 after finishing jump school and my first rotation through the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Johnson. The barracks on Butner Road were my home for the next 18 months. Standard issue 2-story concrete blocks with narrow windows, thin mattresses, and that constant low hum of fluorescent lights that never quite shut off even when you flipped the switch to red for night discipline. Most of us were too tired after JRTC to care about the peeling linoleum or the way the stairwells smelled faintly of old gun oil and mildew. We just wanted racks and hot chow. I bunked in a corner room on the second floor, top rack, battle buddy on the bottom. She was on detail the night it started. We had rolled back onto post 2 days earlier, still wired from the rotation, her sleeping in snatches between gear turn-in and medical screenings. Around 0400, I woke to the sound of marching. Boots on concrete. Not the sharp crack of a formation drill on the quad outside. No, this was inside the building, echoing off the cinder block walls like a contained parade. Low, rhythmic cadence. Count drifted up the stairwell. The kind drill sergeants used to keep troops in step during honor guard rehearsals. except no one runs honor guard at 0400 in a line company barracks. I sat up slowly, elbows on my knees, listening. The cadence grew closer, boots syncing perfectly, then stopped directly outside my door. 3 measured knocks followed, official, restrained, the way a detail leader announces before entering quarters. "Who is it?" I called, voice rough from sleep. No answer. Another 3 knocks, identical. I swung my legs over the side of the rack, dropped to the floor barefoot, and crossed to the door. When I opened it, the hallway stretched empty in both directions under the dim red emergency lights. No soldiers, no shadows moving. Just the faint smell of wet wool and brass polish that shouldn't have been there in summer. At the far end, near the stairwell landing, shapes resolved out of the gloom. 6 figures in dress blues, slow marching in formation, carrying a flag-draped coffin between them. The flag hung limp despite the motion, as though the air itself refused to stir it. Their faces were indistinct, dark ovals beneath service caps. No features visible. They paused at the top of the stairs, turned as a unit toward me, and one raised a white-gloved hand in a slow salute. Then they simply dissolved into the wall, like smoke pulled into vents. I stood frozen in the doorway until the hallway lights snapped back to full white, and the morning CQ runner came clattering up the stairs with his clipboard. He asked if I was okay. I muttered something about a bad dream and closed the door. Next morning, I asked around the platoon. No one else had heard marching. No one had seen anything. The barracks orderly, an older specialist who had been there since before the name change from Bragg, just shrugged when I mentioned it. "Old story," he said. Back when they were drafting Northwoods, the planners talked about staging full military funerals, mock caskets, caissons, the works, to sell the casualties to the press, make it look real, make people angry enough to demand action. Never happened. But people still whisper about hearing processions in the old blocks. I laughed it off. Sounded like classic post-legend. Every base has them. But the laugh felt thin. 7 nights later, it came again. Same time, same marching. This time the cadence was louder, boots striking harder, as though the detail had grown heavier. I recorded it on my phone, holding the device out the cracked door. The audio captured everything. The measured steps, the low murmur of orders. Detail, halt, present, arms, for the fallen of Pretext Delta. Then silence as the procession reached my doorway. The coffin appeared closer this time, directly outside my room. The flag rippled once, unnaturally, like something underneath had shifted. Under the cloth, the shapes weren't right. Too many limbs suggested, too many outlines overlapping, as though the casket held composites instead of bodies. Arms folded wrong, heads turned at impossible angles. The lead pallbearer turned his faceless head toward me. No eyes, but I felt watched. I slammed the door so hard the frame rattled through the deadbolt and backed against the opposite wall. The marching continued down the corridor, faded toward the far stairwell, then stopped. Complete silence. In the morning, I played the recording for my squad leader in the day room. He listened through earbuds, face draining of color as the file progressed. When it ended, he pulled the buds out slowly. "That's not possible, Torres. Your phone was in your pocket the whole time. No external speaker, no Bluetooth. How'd it pick up sound that clear?" The file was still there, crisp, time-stamped, no artifacts. I had no explanation. I stopped sleeping in that room. For the next 3 weeks I crashed on a buddy's floor in another block, duffel bag for a pillow. Most nights nothing happened, but every so often, usually around the same witching hour, I would wake to faint boots on concrete somewhere in the distance, never close enough to record again, never loud enough for anyone else to notice. I still hear the procession sometimes, even after moving to new quarters. Not every night, but often enough to keep me checking door locks twice. Like the military never stopped rehearsing the funeral. Like the caskets are still empty, waiting for real names to be inscribed, real grief to fill them. Like the plan to stage the dead never truly died, just changed venues. From briefing rooms in the Pentagon to the quiet corridors of Butner Road Barracks, where soldiers try to sleep between wars. And sometimes, when the wind is right through the pines, I swear I hear one more detail. The soft rustle of a flag being folded over and over, as though practice makes perfect. Chapter 3. The Hijacker in the Mirror. My name is Staff Sergeant Malik Johnson, Special Forces Support Group. I've been at Fort Liberty on and off since 2018, but the Smoke Bomb Hill Barracks became my permanent home after the 2024 reorg that folded more SEOP billets into our support footprint. Those buildings are older than most of the guys in my team. Low-slung brick structures from the Vietnam era, narrow windows that let in too much Carolina humidity, and latrines with mirrors that have seen better decades. The kind of place where the fluorescent buzz never fully stops, even at 0 dark 30. That particular night, in mid-2025, I had pulled security for a classified evening brief in one of the SCIFs buried under the compound. The instructor, retired colonel who still consulted for the group, walked us through historical false flag case studies. He lingered on Northwoods longer than the slide deck required. Rejected for obvious reasons, he said, clicking to the next bullet. But the mindset behind it, that kind of calculated deception, doesn't evaporate when a president says no. It lingers in the doctrine, in the training, in the people who study it. He paused, looked around the room like he was weighing whether to say the rest. Sometimes I wonder if it lingers in the places we keep those files. I didn't think much of it then. Briefs like that are routine. But the words stuck. I hit the latrine around 1:30 after the session wrapped. The mirrors were still fogged from someone's late shower. Condensation ran in slow tracks down the glass. I wiped a clear circle with my sleeve, just enough to see my face. My reflection stared back. Same ACU top, same tired eyes, same short fade. Then it changed. The uniform shifted. Early 60s cut, high-waisted trousers, wider lapels, tie clip instead of Velcro. My face remained, but the eyes went vacant, pupils blown wide like someone had hit them with a flash. The mouth moved, though I felt no vibration in my own throat. Boarding complete. Destination Miami International. Blame Havana. Public will demand retaliation. I stepped back. The reflection followed, pressing forward until its palms flattened against the inside of the glass. No sound, but I could read the lips forming the same phrase again, slower, deliberate. I blinked hard, once, twice. When my eyes opened, it was me again. Normal uniform, normal expression. Just a man staring at himself in a foggy mirror at 01:30. But the handprint stayed, not on my side, on the other side of the glass. 5 clear fingers palm heel smudged as though someone had pushed hard from within the mirror trying to get out. I reached up and touched the spot. Cold. No condensation there, just the outline of a hand that wasn't mine. I reported it to the medics the next morning as possible dehydration hallucination after a long day. They nodded, drew blood, told me to hydrate and get more rack time. Standard line. I didn't mention the handprint. How do you explain something that only shows up when you're looking straight at it? Weeks passed without incident. Then it happened again. Same latrine, same hour. I avoided mirrors after lights out for a while, but you can't avoid them forever in barracks life. I was brushing my teeth, eyes down on the sink, when the fog cleared on its own. No steam. No one had run hot water. The reflection waited. This time it spoke. Soft, like a voice memo played through cheap speakers. The plan evolves. Modern pretexts, digital hijackings, social media vectors. Echoes never die, Sergeant. They adapt. My toothbrush clattered into the basin. I looked up. The reflection's mouth kept moving in perfect sync with the words, but my own lips stayed shut. I felt the air go thick, the way it does before a storm. The handprint reappeared, larger, fingers splayed wider, pressing so hard the glass bowed inward a fraction. I backed out of the latrine without turning around, slammed the door, stood in the hallway breathing like I'd just sprinted a 2-mile. When I finally went back in, flashlight in hand, door propped open, the mirror was clear. No print, no distortion. It's just me, looking pale under the lights. That was the night I smashed it. I waited until CQ lights dimmed, then drove my elbow into the center of the glass. It spiderwebbed on the first hit, shattered on the second. Shards rained into the sink and onto the tile. The noise brought the charge of quarters running, boots pounding down the corridor. He found me standing there, knuckles bleeding, staring at the empty frame. "Johnson, what the hell?" "Slipped," I said. "Wet floor. Hit my funny bone on the way down." He didn't buy it, but he didn't push. They replaced the mirror the next duty day. Standard government issue, same size, same bevel. I avoided looking directly at it for weeks. Kept my head down, brushed teeth by feel, shaved with eyes on the faucet. But mirrors have a way of catching you off guard. Late one night, coming back from the gym, I caught a glimpse in passing. Not my reflection this time. Another version of me. Same build, same face, but dressed in that old Class A uniform again. Standing at parade rest, planning. The mouth moved once. "Stand by for modern variant. Witnesses required." I didn't smash anything that time. I just walked away faster than I meant to. I still use that latrine, still see my reflection most days. But every so often, when the building is quiet and the post is asleep, I catch the flicker. A different uniform, a different posture, a different plan being rehearsed in silence. Like the hijacker never boarded a plane in 1962. Like he just stepped sideways, into the glass, into the barracks, into the heads of soldiers who study deception for a living. And he's still waiting for clearance. Chapter 4. Voices from the dead net. My name is Corporal Liam O'Connor, 1st Special Forces Command. I've been in the Smoke Bomb Hill Barracks since the spring of 2025, after my team rotated back from a long stint supporting partner forces downrange. The rooms here are the usual mix. Cinder block walls painted institutional grey, metal racks bolted to the floor, and Wi-Fi that drops every time more than half the floor tries to stream at once. Old infrastructure meets new soldiers. You deal with it. That night in late October, I was alone in the room. My roommate was pulling an all-nighter in the Ops Center running network diagnostics for an upcoming exercise. I had the place to myself, laptop open on the desk, offline, and air-gapped per standard procedure for anything classified adjacent. I was reviewing unclassified PSYOP case studies, open source stuff pulled from public archives, when the audio started without warning. No browser tab open, no media player running. Just a sudden low crackle from the built-in speakers, like an old shortwave receiver finding a signal. Then voices. Clear, measured, the kind of clipped baritone you hear in declassified Joint Chiefs recordings. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida. Real or simulated, the latter is preferred for control of narrative. I recognized it instantly. On Northwoods again, the exact phrasing from the 1962 memo. I slammed the laptop lid shut, the sound cut off mid-sentence. I reopened it slowly. Desktop clean, no applications launched. Task Manager showed nothing unusual, no rogue processes, no hidden audio streams. I ran a quick virus scan, even though the machine was supposed to be locked down. Clean. I powered it off completely, pulled the battery for good measure, and sat in the dark for 10 minutes, waiting for my pulse to settle. The next time it happened was 3 nights later. I was half asleep on my rack, phone charging on the nightstand, when the speakers fired up again. Same volume, same static veil. But this time, the voice wasn't archival. It was mine. Execute modern variant, cyber false flag, barracks witnesses required for credibility, casualties simulated, outrage engineered. Proceed on my mark. My own cadence, my slight Boston edge on the vowels. But I hadn't spoken. I hadn't even been in the room when the recording, if that's what it was, would have been made. I lunged for the laptop, yanked the power cord, then the battery again. Silence returned, but my skin stayed cold. I unplugged every device in the room that night. Charger bricks, external hard drive, even the smart bulb in the ceiling fixture. Nothing should have been able to play audio. Yet, the next evening, as I walked back from chow, I heard faint murmuring through the air vents. Low, conversational, threading through the ductwork like someone had set up shop inside the HVAC. I traced the sound to the vent above my desk. Kneeling on the chair, ear close, I caught fragments. O'Connor, Liam. Serial number redacted. Witness designation primary. Additional targets. Ramirez, Torres, Johnson, Nguyen. All currently billeted in affected blocks. Volunteers for the operation. Casualties staged for effect. Names, our names. The ones who had already started talking, quietly, off the record, about the strange things happening in these barracks. I backed away so fast, I knocked over the chair. The whispering stopped the moment I moved. I reported it the next morning as a possible security breach. Someone spoofing voices, maybe a prank with cloned audio from training recordings. The SigSec team swept the room, found nothing. No hidden mics, no compromised devices, no unauthorized network pings. They chalked it up to stress and overactive imagination after a long deployment. Suggested I talk to behavioral health. I nodded, signed the log, and moved out that afternoon. Crashed on a buddy's couch in another company area 3 buildings over. The incidents didn't follow me, not at first, but the messages did. 2 weeks later, my personal phone, civilian line, never used for work, started receiving texts from unknown numbers, blocked senders that changed every time I reported them. The content was always the same format. The net is open. Join the broadcast. Then a timestamp. Then a phrase pulled straight from Northwoods variants. Sink ship in harbour. Blame adversary. Public demands action. Or stage hijacking via encrypted app. Leak manifests. Watch outrage cascade. I changed numbers. Twice. The messages kept coming, always from fresh blocks, always arriving between 0200 and 0400 when I was trying to force sleep. Once, during a routine barracks inspection, I left my phone face down on the desk while the platoon sergeant walked through. When he left, I flipped it over. New message waiting. Witnesses still required. Your turn to volunteer. I deleted everything. Factory reset the phone, stopped carrying it to bed. Still, some nights I wake to the vibration that isn't there, phantom buzz against my thigh. And I check anyway. Screen dark. No notifications. But the feeling lingers. Something broadcasting on a frequency only I can hear. I don't sleep in the old room anymore. I don't even walk that corridor if I can avoid it. But the voices don't need proximity. They found me through dead nets, through vents, through devices that shouldn't talk. Like the original plan never needed approval to keep transmitting. It just needed listeners. And now it has them. Soldiers who study deception. Soldiers who train to manipulate perception. Soldiers who live in barracks built on ground where those plans were first drawn up. The dead net stays live. Quiet most nights. Patient. Waiting for one of us to answer back. Chapter 5. The Unexecuted Order. My name is Master Sergeant Kara Nguyen, 4th Psychological Operations Group, with 12 years in service and 4 combat deployments behind me. I've seen enough real-world chaos to know the difference between battlefield nerves and something that doesn't belong in the rational world. The barracks on Ardennes Street, the same block Sergeant Ramirez described, became my assignment in January 2025 after a billet shuffle. Second floor, end room. The one with the window that looks straight into the pine line and never quite closes all the way. I didn't mind. Quiet suited me after years of forward operating bases. I kept a small stack of declassified Northwoods documents on my desk. Not for nostalgia, but for training prep. The group still uses the 1962 memo as a cautionary tale in influence operations courses. How far planners can go when the mission overrides ethics, and how quickly civilian oversight can kill even the most meticulously crafted deception. I marked passages in red pen, highlighted phrases like pretext incident and fabricated casualties. Standard instructor prep, nothing more. Then the papers started moving. First time I noticed was after PT one morning. I'd left the stack squared away beside my laptop, came back from the shower to find the top sheet rotated 90 degrees, the red ink annotations circled in fresh blue, my own pen, which had been capped and clipped to my notebook. The circled phrase, approved at echelons, execute at liberty. No one else had been in the room, door locked, window latched. I stared at the handwriting, identical to mine, but I hadn't made those marks. I photographed the page, then burned the entire stack in the gravel pit behind the motor pool that evening. Watched the flames eat the paper until nothing remained but ash and a faint chemical smell. Reported nothing. Some things you don't put on a 2823. The next incident came 2 weeks later. Around 02:30, I woke to the sensation of someone standing at parade rest, at the foot of my rack. Not a dream. The air felt heavier, colder, like someone had opened a freezer door in the room. I rolled over slowly, hand sliding toward the combat knife under my pillow out of habit. He was there. Tall figure in shadow, shoulders squared, hands clasped behind his back in the old regulation manner. No rank visible on the sleeves, no name tape. Just outline against the faint red glow from the exit sign down the hall. He didn't move, didn't breathe, but when he spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, low, measured, without lip movement. The rejection was temporary. The mission persists. I sat up fast, knife in hand. Identify yourself. No answer at first. Then the figure stepped half into the light from my phone charger. The face wasn't right. Composite. Jawline like Kennedy's official portraits, eyes too dark like Castro's file photos, brow ridge echoing General Lemnitz's stern briefing room glare from the archived footage. A patchwork of the men who had touched the plan, architects, and the one who buried it. Psychological residue, the voice continued. Ideas do not die when ink is denied signature. They inhabit. They wait for fertile ground. I kept the blade low but ready. Show yourself. Full face. Rank. Unit. The composite shifted, features sliding like bad digital morphing. You study the plan. You teach it. You carry it in your mind every time you brief a deception scenario. That is enough invitation. The room temperature dropped again. My breath fogged. The figure raised one hand, palm out. Not threat, but presentation. All units, Northwoods variant green. Stand by for pretext execution. My wall locker radio, off since I moved in, crackled to life. Static. Then the same looped fragment I'd heard others whisper about. I lunged forward, knife slashing through empty air. The figure dissolved like smoke pulled into the vent. The radio died mid-sentence. Silence crashed back in. I tore through the room after that, dumped every drawer, checked vents, light fixtures, even pried up the baseboard trim, looking for hidden speakers or projectors. Nothing. I burned the last few stray printouts I'd kept digitally. Screenshots deleted, cloud backups purged. Still smelled smoke some nights, faint and acrid, drifting under the door when no one was burning anything outside. The barracks feel heavier now. Not just mine, every room on the floor. Soldiers move slower down the corridors, eyes darting to corners they never checked before. Conversations drop when someone mentions old plans or what-ifs. No one says Northwoods aloud anymore, but the word hangs in the air like cordite after a range day. I still teach the block of instruction, still pull up the declassified slides, still point out where the line was crossed and where leadership drew it back. But now I pause longer on the final bullet. Plan rejected by President Kennedy, March 1962. No further action authorized. I wonder if no further action was ever truly final. Last week I woke again at the same hour. No figure this time, just the radio clicking on by itself. All units, pretext remains viable, witnesses in place, awaiting final signature. I didn't get up. I lay there listening until it looped 3 times and faded. Then I reached over, unplugged the power strip entirely, and stared at the ceiling until reveille. I don't know what waits for that final signature. A crisis big enough to dust off old playbooks. A moment when perception management overrides restraint. Or maybe just one more soldier who reads the file too closely, thinks about it too long in the dark hours between duty and sleep. The order was never executed in 1962, but the intent never stood down. It moved into the barracks. into the walls, into us. And some nights, when the wind rattles the pines and the red lights hum, I swear I hear the scratch of a pen on paper. Final approval being signed in a room that doesn't exist anymore, waiting only for someone to say yes. Chapter 6. The Phantom Detail. My name is Sergeant Major Daniel Hale, retired after 24 years, but still pulling contractor security shifts at Fort Liberty under the old smoky Bomb Hill footprint. The post kept me on after I hung up the uniform. Mostly night patrols, access control at the PSYOP compounds, and the occasional escort for classified movements. They like having someone who knows the layout, knows the history, knows when to ask questions and when to keep his mouth shut. I've walked these corridors longer than most of the active duty kids have been alive. In late 2025, the contract extended me to cover the Ardennes Street barracks during the overnight hours. Budget cuts had thinned the military police patrols, so contractors filled the gaps. My route took me through the same blocks where the stories had started circulating quietly among the NCOs: Ramirez's radiostatic, Torres's funeral march, Johnson's mirror, O'Connor's dead net voices, Nguyen's composite apparition. I heard the whispers in the guard shack, saw the way soldiers avoided certain hallways after lights out. I didn't laugh it off. I'd seen stranger things in places that weren't supposed to remember. My shift started at 2200. Standard sweep, check exterior doors, verify locks on sensitive rooms, log any unusual activity. Around 03:15, I was on the second floor landing of Building 412 when the lights dimmed. Not a flicker, but a deliberate rollback to emergency red, the way they do for night vision drills. No alarm, no power surge announcement over the PA, just the corridor sinking into that bloody glow. Then I heard the boots. Multiple sets, moving in tight formation, coming up the stairwell from below. Not the casual tread of a late-night CQ runner. This was precise. Heel-toe, synchronized like an honor guard detail marching at half-time cadence. I stepped back against the wall, hand resting on my duty flashlight, and waited. They emerged at the top of the stairs. 6 soldiers in Class A uniforms, early 60s pattern. Peaked caps, 4 in hand ties, shoulder boards with no visible rank or unit flash. Faces blank, smooth, featureless ovals where eyes, nose, mouth should have been. They carried nothing at first, then resolved into formation around an empty spot in the center, as though supporting an invisible stretcher or casket. Hands positioned at the ready, gloved fingers curled just so. They turned as one and marched down the corridor toward me. No sound beyond the boots, no rustle of fabric, no jingle of medals, just the measured steps echoing off concrete. I keyed my radio. Security 1, this is Hale. Got a possible unauthorized detail on second floor Ardennes 412. 6 passengers in vintage Class A's. Advise. Static answered. No response from the desk. I tried again. Same dead air. The detail stopped 10 feet in front of me. The lead figure, tallest, broadest shoulders, tilted its blank head slightly, the way a senior NCO assesses a junior before issuing orders. Then it raised one white-gloved hand in a slow, deliberate salute. The others followed in perfect unison. I returned it out of reflex. Old habits die hard. The lead figure lowered its hand and spoke. No mouth moved. The voice came from the air itself, calm, authoritative, layered with the faint reverb of a secure conference line. Detail reports for duty. Pretext, execution pending final authorization. Witnesses assembled, casualties designated. Operation Northwoods variant Delta Green. Stand by to receive. I felt the temperature drop. My breath fogged in the red light. The corridor seemed to lengthen behind them, doors stretching farther apart, shadows pooling deeper in the corners. Who authorized this? I asked, keeping my tone level. Chain of command? The blank face regarded me. Authorization originates at echelons above reality. Rejection noted in 1962. Override protocol engaged. The intent endures. One of the figures stepped forward. Smaller frame. Posture suggesting a staff officer. It extended a gloved hand holding a folded sheet of paper that hadn't been there a second earlier. I took it without thinking. Yellowed foolscap, typed in old courier font. Top line, Joint Chiefs of Staff Memorandum. Below it, the familiar proposals, hijackings, bombings, mock funerals, followed by a new block in red ink, handwritten in the same precise style I'd seen on Nguyen's burned documents. Liberty variant approved. Execute the 3rd of February 2026. Primary witnesses, Hale, Daniel. Secondary, prior contacts. Signature required. My name, my social, my current contractor badge number, the date, today's date. I looked up. The detail waited, patient, motionless. The lead figure produced a pen from nowhere, black government-issue ballpoint, and offered it grip first. I didn't take it. Instead, I stepped sideways, keeping them in peripheral vision, and backed toward the stairwell door. This ends here. No execution, no signature. The lead figure lowered the pen. For the first time, something like expression flickered across the blank oval. Disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. Refusal logged. Echo persists. Next cycle will resume when fertile ground reappears. They about faced as one, boots clicking in unison, and marched back toward the stairwell. Halfway down the corridor, the red lights snapped back to full white. The detail dissolved mid-stride, uniforms fading into mist, boots trailing off into silence. Gone. I stood there until my knees threatened to buckle. The paper was still in my hand. Real, crinkled at the edges, ink still wet where my dame had been added. I carried it down to the guard shack, slid it across the desk to the night supervisor without a word. He read it, frowned, then looked up. "Where'd you get this, Hale?" "Second floor. Detail handed it to me." He studied my face. "You okay?" "No." He folded the sheet, tucked it into a secure envelope, and sealed it. "I'll log it. Chain takes it from here." I finished the shift, clocked out at 600, drove off post. Haven't been back on the Ardennes block since. But some nights, when the calendar flips close to February again, I wake to the sound of boots in the hallway outside my apartment door. Slow, measured, waiting. I don't open it. I know who's standing there, and I know they still need one signature to make it official. Chapter 7. The Signature. Still pending. My name is Specialist Aidan Brooks, 4th Psychological Operations Group. I arrived at Fort Liberty in November 2025, fresh out of AIT and the language school pipeline, assigned to Ardennes Street Barracks. Second floor, the same block that had already earned a quiet reputation among the NCOs. They didn't warn me outright. Just sidelong glances when I asked why certain rooms stayed empty longer than others, why some guys preferred crashing on couches in other companies rather than sleep in their own racks. I figured it was hazing or burnout stories. I was wrong. Today is February 3rd, 2026. The date circled on every PSYOP training calendar because it's the anniversary of the original Northwoods rejection. March 13th gets the official nod in the slides, but the planner's internal memos reference February 3rd as the day the final draft landed on McNamara's desk before Kennedy shut it down. Coincidence, maybe, or not. I woke at 02:47 to the sound of a single sheet of paper sliding under my door. Not shoved, placed, deliberate. The hallway lights were on emergency red again. No power flicker, no storm outside, just that slow bleed from white to blood. I sat up, boots still laced from the previous day's field problem, and crossed the room without turning on my overhead. The paper was old stock, yellowed foolscap, same as the one Sergeant Major Hale described in the contractor debrief I overheard last week. Typed header, Joint Chiefs of Staff Memorandum. Below it, the familiar proposals, then the handwritten red ink addendum. Liberty variant approved. Execute 3rd February 2026. Primary witnesses, Hale, refused, Nguyen, observed, Brooks, final. Signature required. My name. My DOD ID number. My current billet assignment. Ink still glossy in places, like it had been written minutes earlier. I didn't touch it at first, just stared. Then I heard them. Boots in the corridor. Not marching this time. Single set, slow, measured, stopping outside my door. 3 knocks, official, restrained. I didn't answer. The knocks repeated, exact same rhythm. The voice came through the wood, low and calm, the same layered tone that had haunted the others. Specialist Brooks, the detail awaits your acknowledgement. Pretext execution window closes at 0400. Witnesses must confirm. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. I'm not signing anything. Silence stretched. Then the door handle turned, slowly as though testing the lock. It didn't give. But the air in the room thickened, temperature dropping until my breath fogged in short bursts. The composite figure stepped through the closed door. Not around it. Through. Tall, shoulders squared, uniform shifting between eras. 60s Class A, modern ACU, dress blues, all layered like bad video overlay. Face still patchwork. Kennedy's jaw, Lemnitzer's brow, Castro's eyes, now blended with fragments of every soldier who had refused or witnessed before me. Ramirez's weary expression. Torres's wide eyes, Johnson's clenched jaw. Nguyen's steady gaze. Hale's resignation. It stopped 3 feet away. Extended the same black government issue pen. The intent requires completion, it said. Rejection delays, it does not erase. You have studied the plan, you have carried it in briefings, you are the final link. I kept my hands at my sides. I'm not a part of any operation that never got approved. The figure tilted its head. Approval is perception. Perception is reality. PSYOP doctrine, you know this. The radio on my nightstand, unplugged for weeks, crackled alive. All units, Liberty variant green, final witness on station, stand by for signature. I lunged for the door, yanked it open, corridor empty. Red lights pulsing. The figure remained in my room, patient. I ran, down the stairwell, boots pounding, past the day room where the vending machines hummed like nothing was wrong, out into the February cold. Pine wind cut through my PT shirt. I didn't stop until I reached the guard shack at the end of the block. The night supervisor looked up from his log. "Brooks, you good?" I shoved the paper across the counter. "This came under my door. Someone's playing games." He read it. Face went still. "This is the same sheet Hale turned in last month. We secured it in evidence. How?" He didn't finish. The lights in the shack dimmed to red. From the radio on his desk came the same voice. "Witness Brooks has relocated. Detail adjusts. Execution proceeds." We both froze. The supervisor keyed his radio. "Security 1, priority. Ardennes 412. Possible breach. Send backup." Static. Then the voice again, softer, almost conversational. "Backup not required. Witnesses already assembled." Outside the window, shapes moved in the parking lot. 6 figures in vintage Class A's, forming up around an empty center space. Blank faces turned toward the shack. One raised a gloved hand in salute. The supervisor hit the panic button. Alarms should have screamed across post. Nothing. Just silence, and the red glow spreading like spilled ink. I looked down at the paper, still on the counter. The signature line was blank. Beside it, in fresh red ink that hadn't been there seconds ago, awaiting final mark. The composite figure appeared in the doorway behind us, stepped out of shadow, not through the frame. It held the pen out again. "Time," it said. I didn't take it. Instead, I tore the sheet in half, then quarters, then smaller. "Let the pieces fall." The figure watched. No anger. Just quiet patience. "Refusal logged," it said. "Echo persists. Next cycle resumes when fertile ground reappears." It faded. The red lights snapped back to white. The parking lot detail dissolved into mist. The alarms finally wailed. Late, angry, post-wide. MPS arrived 10 minutes later. Took statements. Confiscated the torn paper. Told us it was probably a coordinated prank by disgruntled troops. Psychological stress after long rotations. Nothing more. I don't believe that. Because tonight, as I write this from a temporary billeting trailer off-post, my phone buzzed once. Unknown number. Single message. The signature line remains open. The plan adapts. I deleted it. Powered off. But I know it will come again. February 3rd passed without execution. But the date isn't the deadline. It's the marker. The barracks wait. The voices wait. The composite figure waits. And somewhere in the wiring, in the vents, in the minds of soldiers who study deception too long, the unexecuted order keeps broadcasting, patient, quiet, ready for the next witness to say yes.